start, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I'm Chase Harris. I started my legal career at the state attorney's office. Was there for several years, and then after 4 years, I joined my father, Harris Greedy Rosner. My practice is primarily personal injury and general civil or commercial litigation. I don't know if you want to start with an introduction or start with.
Go ahead.
Okay, and then, and what we talked about having this discussion with y'all today, I know
It's the first time he's ever asked me for permission for anything.
What we talked about was the topic for today was, what Doug mentioned, the transition and, what it looks like, with the new next generation coming in. So we chose, to describe it as, grooming the next generation. So we thought that the best way to start would be looking at the definition of grooming. So we looked it up, and it's one is the practice of brushing and cleaning the coat of a horse, dog, or other animal. the practice of an animal, or the practice by an animal of cleaning its own or another animal's fur or skin. And then the other definition that we looked up was the action by a pedophile of preparing a child for a meeting, especially via an internet chat room, with the intention of committing a sexual offense. So this is not the conversation you all anticipated having.
I thought they'd keep people.
Yeah. No, but we did have some discussion about what it's been like. My father and I are very similar, but also very different styles, different personalities. So the transition of working in the office together has been an interesting one, and I'll let him start with his introduction, and we'll go from there.
So just to give you a little perspective, I was born locally 71 years ago, born in St. Vincent's Hospital, Hendricks Avenue School, Landon, DuPont, because there was a transition, graduated from Wilson in 1969. Gainesville undergraduate, Gainesville Law School, and by way of perspective, and there's a reason for telling you this, I have 5 children. 3 of the older children, Chase is the youngest of the older children, are all attorneys, all married to attorneys. My wife is a phenomenal family law lawyer, and so I constantly get the question, it must be really interesting around the dinner table. Well, not true at all. It's a series of 6 people picking on one person, and I can tell you it's been helpful in many respects. And I tell you that because I've lived through the application process, the law school process, the bars, the starting work. My daughter's a 12-year lawyer that just moved back to town with her husband and 3 children to open up the Florida office for mass torts for a firm that she's been working for in Kansas City. My son Blake has twins in Gainesville, and he does asset protection with the offshore Cook Trust that I don't understand and have never understood. I'm married to Paola, and we have a 14 and a 16-year-old. And if you think technology is a challenge, it's a challenge in so many ways you can't even imagine, both at work and at home. I tell you all that, and my sort of life guide is something from Stephen Covey from either with the preface of one of his books or in the books. Might not even be Stephen Covey, but he's riding on a train into New York City on a Sunday morning, and there's 3 children that are just climbing all over the seats and screaming and causing all kinds of problems. And he finally gets up from his seat, walks over to the lady that's there with him and says, "Could you do something to control your children?" She said, "I am so sorry." She goes, "Their father just died, and I haven't figured out how to tell them." So everything that I approach, and I mean literally everything, despite my Rotary background and the like, is to look at things and say, you never know what's going on in somebody's life, whether it's their children, their spouse, somebody they work with, somebody that pulled in front of them. So I try to give that little bit of tolerance to things, which has not been easy. And I say that as a precursor to technology. When I first started practicing 47 years ago, I was with the state. I then moved over and shared space with probably just a phenomenal lawyer, Bob Willis, who many of you know, who I think has just stopped practicing or has toned it down. Then I was with Barry Zisser for 5 years, and then I started the office where we are about 35 years ago. The prospect of working with a son that I loved dearly and loved from the time he was a little bit, fought with from the time he was a little fella about everything from whether it was night or day was scary. But he brought, in my mind, the ability to bring technology, marketing, discussions with personnel, and many things that I approached a certain way in a completely different perspective. On the technology side, I was just going to mention two last things and then let Chase start filling in blanks. I was one of the first people on the marketing technology side to meet with Google, probably 18 or 20 years ago, and the subject of that meeting was marketing. I didn't understand Google. I was overwhelmed and flattered by the presentation. I signed the contract for almost $40,000 20 years ago and decided I'd light the world up. Google had no ability to follow through with anything. I wasn't contacted by anyone. That went on for 6 months, and I finally terminated the contract. It's a little like being offered Tesla or Google stock and not doing it. Having said that, the substance of our marketing in those days and the substance of our technology was really an IBM typewriter that had no memory at all. And I had first started practicing in the days when they first started with a little bit of technology. But Chase and I had this conversation walking into a new telephone system that I was very proud of, and within 6 months at the office, Chase is telling me how we're going to walk away from that and start with a phenomenal telephone company that can do amazing things. So if you want to talk a little bit.
So part of, I guess, transitioning from, so I was prosecutor at the state attorney's office, and it's the city's technology, and it was, I don't even know how many attorneys in the office, but there were a lot of attorneys, it's a very large office, and I think there was one IT person that managed the whole office. And the office, so when I started, we started at the old courthouse annex in a very, very old building, and transitioned to a brand new facility with new technology. I mean, new phones, new computers. It was very up to date. And I transitioned from there to my office now, where it was fine. And I'm a technological person, and I saw the challenges. I saw the things that we were doing. We're sort of reinventing the wheel every day with a lot of our documents, and the way that everything operated was just very different. I sat down on my first day, and I had my computer set up, and there's a dictation device in front of me, and what's this for? Well, you dictate your memos into it, and then your assistant will type it up, and then you'll review it, and then you mark it off, and then give it back to them, and they mark it up. They make the changes again, you give it back to you, and that can happen 5 or 6 times till it gets right.
I still think that's the way to do it.
I know. So it was sort of a startling reaction to see, going from the state attorney's office, where we had some automation where we could prepare the documents themselves, but we just typed in ourselves, to seeing that take place. So technology has been a challenge, and a lot of the people at the office are used to that. So there's only so much I can do, and I don't want to be the son of the person who's managing the place and changing everything for everyone. So there's a balance there. So I have encouraged those who've joined us, and I've tried to encourage people to make the transition to using technology. But I know that technology is, it's intimidating. If you don't know what you're doing, if you get a little bit behind with technology, you can get lost in it. So we still have the dictation. So that's still a practice and an operation for a lot of people. But for someone who was technological, we had a case management program that I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't understand the money coming in, money going out. I couldn't figure out any of it. So we transitioned over to a whole new case management program. It's one that Clio, I think a lot of firms may use it. And the talking about grooming the next generation side of things, it's been interesting to see. It's very challenging for a lot of people to get on board with change, and that works both ways. So there's a lot that I have to learn from others, but it works both ways. Where the younger generation, the new generation, we also have a lot to bring to the generation that's been doing it, that may have the right way of doing it, but has been doing it the right way for a long time. And the best example of that is bringing those two things together. We've got someone who would dictate all of his time into it, someone would go in and type it all in, and I explained to them, you don't have to do that. You can just type in your time online, and it's taken. We've had Clio for about 4 years now, and just last week I had one of the attorneys come up to me and say, finally I went online and did it. It took me about 30 seconds rather than taking about half a day. So it's one of those things that transitioning the technology to the other generation is also something that's really helpful. It's intimidating, but it's also very helpful.
Jumping a little bit onto the marketing side, when I first started practicing, I was sharing space with Bob Willis. Charles, I assume you know Bob as well. And I had the basis and the privilege of growing up here So people mistakenly thought I knew what I was doing, just because I had been here for so long and had a good background with the state attorney's office. But I did a lot of what we all do, and I look around the room, there's a lot of sole practitioners, and that is sometimes what comes through the door you might not know how to do, but you can figure it out. That's why they call it practice. But at the same time, the nice part about practicing law, and I've told people repeatedly, unlike the practice of medicine, if you decide to change specialties, then you go back to school for 2 to 4 years. I had been doing criminal prosecution, I did a general practice, I then started doing certain specialized areas, and I had to learn those areas. And I did nothing then for many years except criminal defense work. Probably 15 years is all I did. And then I had one of the lawyers in the office where I am now walk in and say, if that's all you're going to do, then I don't want to continue because I need some crossover and I need your help. So I woke up that morning and started divesting myself of those cases and started doing plaintiff's work 15 years ago. So the nicest part about practicing law, 2 things, or many things, but one in particular is if you want to transition into a different area, you do. I mean, you don't go back to school for 2 years. I mean, you give the client the benefit of your studies and your work and what you're doing and the like. But you can, and I've transitioned into it, and it's a blast. And I say that because that holds true for everything that I'm about to say. And by the way, I can preface these remarks by telling you, we were told early on the attention span in a church or temple or otherwise is about 11 minutes. And my own personal is about 5 minutes, so we won't carry on too long. There's enough people here that we can talk about it. Is your passion. If you don't like what you're doing, whether it's practicing law, whether it's doing criminal work, whether it's doing family law, whatever it is, my wife does family law, and I get to live through every single detail of everything that she does from morning until night. I can't even be in the room with a family law lawyer. That's terrible. I'm married to one. It's the most difficult practice in the world. It's a moving target. It never goes away. It's just so difficult. She loves it. She thrives on it. She gets up in the morning and I think it helps her eat breakfast. Having said that, that holds true with community. That holds true with every single thing that I personally do, that I've encouraged Chase. When we first started, marketing was purely getting out in the community. There was nothing. You could run an ad in the newspaper if you wanted to. Getting involved with the Jacks Bar Association. And the Jacks Bar Association is only is only valuable to you and to the bar is if you're doing what you want to do. If you're doing things that you don't want to do, you're not going to do it well. But there are so many opportunities. It's like the practice of law, and this is not trying to hawk your business, but you make it easy by, you find your passion. And with marketing, if we were not out in the community, nothing came through the door. You could be the greatest lawyer in the world, okay? But unless you understood the dollars coming through and the dollars coming out, nothing was going to happen. Okay, so if you don't find that passion with marketing, the world has changed. I would say probably 50% of what we do through the door, even being in practice for 47 years and being from here and having the relationships with lawyers, transactional lawyers that don't do litigation, it's turned to the internet. And my gosh, has it turned to the internet. If you want to,
and that's sort of where I was going to go with that. You know, coming from the state attorney's office, there's a thing that prosecutors, they don't go out. There's very few that go out to any marketing, socializing. They've got plenty of work coming through the door all the time, so they don't have to do any of that. So transitioning from that into private practice with my father, and he's very involved in the community. That was a big part of where the business came in, and we also came to appreciate that on the technology side of things, our digital marketing is a big part. And it's from the time I've been there, you know, we've worked with a few different companies, starting with when we were there, we had just a single individual who was doing some work for us on the side with our website to sort of have something going, and it was blog posts because that's what seemed to be the thing. And we've sort of ramped up where our marketing, the strategy is significantly digital marketing. Our office is very much a specialized practice for what we do. We have the attorneys that have specialty areas. We're not on the side of buses or billboards. So the idea was we'll do digital marketing to target our audience. So we've started working with an organization that actually works. It's actually in our parking lot. It worked out well. There's a building right in our lot, and it's the organization that used to do some advertising for some of the other bigger firms in town. And on working with them, we've come to realize there's a lot more potential on the digital side of marketing and tracking that, and that sort of dovetails into the same, the marketing side of things that we used to do was the phone book. When I started, so I grew up around the office, and I remember being younger and seeing, where every year where the firm landed in the phone book, how far ahead, whether we were the third or fourth, and I remember you telling me to call it double truck, where you got both sides. And even 4 years ago, we got the opportunity to be the back of the phone book. But I think most people do now with the phone book what they did back then, I think they now, unlike what they used to do, pick it up in the plastic bag off their porch and just put it right to the trash can and go to the internet. So we've started to really focus on the online marketing because we're realizing the potential is really there. And that comes with challenges. And I don't know if you were going to mention the Morgan & Morgan letter.
No, go ahead.
So this is an interesting
Twice
side
for
of it.
permission. That's
Yeah, I didn't want to step on toes. We received a letter from Morgan & Morgan, and I'm not going to, it's a very lawyerly letter, so it's about 3 pages, but I'll read just a couple of snippets. But we received a letter that said, from one of the attorneys that said, I'm an operations attorney with Morgan & Morgan. It's come to our attention that firms are purchasing the keywords Morgan & Morgan and other variations through Google Ads. It says that these advertisements are intentionally designed to confuse and mislead individuals looking for our firm. If you're purchasing our keywords, please immediately refrain from purchasing our name, our Morgan & Morgan related keywords from Google Ads and any other search engine. If you're not, please go in, and they've asked for us to do, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the technological side of things, but they've asked for us to go in and put negative keywords so that if people search Morgan & Morgan, we don't show up. And the interesting thing here is for one, I don't think there's anything necessarily, it's bad form, but there's nothing technologically, or there's nothing illegal or wrong about us purchasing the Morgan & Morgan ads, but it's one of those things. We didn't want to step on any toes, and then they agreed that they would reciprocate the same, that they would put us on their negative list, so if somebody searched Harris Greedy Rosner, Morgan & Morgan wouldn't show up. This is talking about the dynamic between the two of us. This was on Tuesday. I received the email, and of course he forwarded it to me. I go and talk with him, and we probably went over it 5 or 6 times, starting as, explaining what he talks about here. Well, explain like I'm a 5-year-old. I try to explain it again, and then drew a map, and it just didn't, it was like speaking a different language. But the technological side of things, that's where I understand, and to the extent that I can. So this was something that, I was able to go in and respond and got it taken care of, and we figured the ultimate goal was, or the ultimate best resolution was to just do what they asked. 1, we weren't purchasing their keywords, and 2, it really benefits us for them not to show up if someone searches our name. So we emailed back nicely and did the negative keyword action, but it's interesting how so much of our marketing and what we bring in is based on things that a lot of times we don't understand. It takes a level of understanding that, and speaking about your passion, this is where I really enjoy things, the technological side of things. So it's been interesting to be able to facilitate that for the office. I know you had another topic next.
Just a couple things. Just in terms of personal relationships with clients and with friends and family and everyone else. I practice with Barry. How many of you know Barry Zisser? Do you know Barry? Barry is now retired. He is probably mid-80s, I would guess, possibly mid-80s. He's a family law lawyer, and I went to work with Barry 35 years ago, 40 years ago. I watched Barry try a week-long trial, and he got decimated. And as he's walking in, the client's down in the waiting room, and he walks past me, and I went, how did it go? He goes, if you consider losing your house, losing your spouse, losing your children, permanent alimony, I mean, if there were 9 things you could lose, he lost 10, and he didn't usually lose. I watched him walk up the steps, sit down with the client, and by the time he left, or even when the client walked in, he was hugging Barry, he was thanking Barry. And I went, the guy obviously either was smoking or drinking on the way up the steps or didn't understand what just happened and it's going to hit him later. Guy leaves and I go, what was that all about? He goes, I talked to him. I said, what do you mean you talked to him? He goes, from day one. He goes, I told him, this is what's going on. Every time I got a pleading, I sent it to him. Every time he called me, and this is what was wonderful. This is a Ed Austin lesson. Anybody that ever worked at the state attorney's office, Charles could tell you, anybody in the room, and I'm sure the public defender's office heard the same thing back in the state attorney's office, and that is, I don't go home at night until my phone calls are returned. I don't care if it's the worst possible phone call, and that's the one thing that Chase has impressed upon me, that the few people during the 4 years that he was there that said nice things about him, and there were very few, was that they always called him back, okay? And so that became a premise. But with Barry, and I do the same thing with clients now, you take your worst possible phone call that you're going to either deliver bad news, you send them the pleadings you don't want to send them, you tell them in advance what's going on as much as you possibly can. People never, ever, ever, it's like the rest of us that don't practice medicine, you can live with a diagnosis, you can live with a prognosis, okay, as long as you know what it is. But guessing, right now my puppy's having all kinds of problems, okay, and try to locate a vet that can give you a straight answer on surgery and long-term treatment. I finally got that answer this morning, but our house has been in turmoil for a week because we couldn't get an answer. We got a great vet, but just couldn't get an answer. People want answers, they want communication, they want to be talked to, and it seems to make all the difference in the world, and I think that's a message that, you know, Chase has. I mean, there's reasons sometimes not to call back.
Well, and I think part of talking about technology, and Jonathan's I'll give him credit for this, because we got our new phone system through them 6 months ago, a year ago, something like that. Yeah, it seems like a while ago, because we went from a standard phone system. It was March. Oh, okay.
That's why we did
yeah,
it.
because you were out of the country, weren't you? So new phone system, and talking about communication being such a big part of it. So one of the things when I first started practicing law, I remember my father sat my wife and I down. My wife is a lawyer as well. She works in-house doing litigation with Florida Blue. When she started, she was actually doing family law at Rogers Towers. And the first thing he sat us down and said, you know, of all the principles you're going to learn, return your phone calls. That's the first thing you do. The worst phone call you know you have to make that day, call them first. And before you go home, return every phone call, because people will remember that. And that's something that has stuck true to both of us. Now, one of the challenges from going into private practice is not everyone wants to give away their cell phone to their clients. It depends. Some clients, you know, it's perfectly fine, but there's challenges involved with doing that. So our new phone system, one of the biggest elements to it was, in addition to a number of other things we can do, is there's an app on my phone that right now, if our receptionist needs to get a hold of me, my phone pages right here, just like it does on my desk. So someone can reach me anytime, anywhere. And the other part of it is if I want to call a client, I go into the app, I can call the client from anywhere. They don't know whether I'm sitting on the beach or sitting in my office, but it just facilitates me being able to talk to them anytime, anywhere. Same thing, they can text and communicate easily that way. The other part of the communication side of things that I think is interesting is when I started, I was asked to send a demand letter for somebody with an issue they had with somebody hitting their car, and it was at a car wash or something very minor. And I sat down, spent 3 hours working on, you know, a nastygram, a demand letter of some kind. And I spent a good 3 hours doing it, and I took it to him, and I said, "What do you think?" And that's a good try. And he pulled out his dictation in about 30 seconds, got the whole thing together. One thing that I've noticed, and that was perfectly fine.
Brilliant.
It was
Brilliant.
It was fine. It was okay. Mine was better, but yours was okay. But the interesting part, so you know, the way that the message ended, and it was appropriate for this one, was, you know, please be governed accordingly, or, you know, please govern yourself accordingly. And I noticed that generationally, I feel like it happens a little differently now, where the communication, at least at the state, you didn't have conflict with your opposing counsel. You didn't want to bite the hand that was feeding you, and as a prosecutor, you've got a lot of power, and the defense attorneys really tend to know that. On the civil side, people aren't so civil. It gets pretty tough, but I've noticed one thing about, you know, that talking about how it works both ways with grooming, that the communication is different. It's nicer, you know. And John and I, we've known each other for years, but we had a case that we litigated pretty heavily for about a year and a half. I don't think that we ever spoke on the phone at any time that we didn't talk for 5 minutes, catching up every single time for us. And I mean, and maybe that's always happened, but the communication, the approach is different. I mean, we can, unlike in the days where you had to write a letter, you know, and 4 days later that person got the letter, then they would draft something back, you know, dictate it, and someone would type it up, and then 4 days later you get a letter back. You can text, you can communicate, and the open communication, I think, makes things easier and better. And I think that's something that we've tried to work in both directions, where everyone communicates more effectively.
I had the pleasure 20 years ago to serve on the JEA board, and there was probably one of the most masterful leaders I've ever worked with, a guy named Walt Bucells. He was subsequent to Royce Lyles, who came in, and we were at a level where JEA was competing with all kinds of folks nationally and internationally on all kinds of issues. And I explained, you know, this is what I do for a living, and let's come at them and let's do this, let's steal their people, let's do everything we do. And he didn't say a word. And then I noticed as he was talking about something 15 minutes later with somebody else. He said, my friends at Duke Energy, my friends at here. And I pulled him to the side later and went, these are not our friends. These are our competition. He goes, these are our friends. They're in business just like we're in business. So I've learned to use that expression, okay? Eddie Farrah, God bless him, is taking business off my plate. Morgan & Morgan, who has some of the best lawyers in the city, okay? The folks sitting around this table will fight me tooth and nail to keep me from feeding my children, but at the same time, they're my friends. And if you stop and think about it and approach it that way, it really makes a heck of a difference, at least in your own psyche, because you can build up that anxiety with the other attorney being the issue rather than the issue being the issue. I was going to mention one thing about personnel, and if we haven't gone too long, and if not, we're really close
Getting close to
anyway.
the discussion time.
Okay, well, one quick thing. Boy, has the world changed in terms of personnel. At one time, people would come into my office and go, I really want to work here, I'll work for this, I'll do this. Now they come in, and I don't mean it in a negative way. That sounds great, but...
What's your policy on President's Day? Yeah.
yeah. How you know, what sort of time do we get, and what sort of time off do we get, and what's the policy on this, and what's the policy on that? So it's been an awakening, but I fall back on Stephen Covey and also realize it's a different time, it's a different psyche. My daughter came out of Vanderbilt Law School, very highly ranked as an athlete and as a scholar, got phenomenal offers, and I went, great, you're gone. This is terrific. Let me help you, you know, pick where you're going to spend 12 hours a day for the next 7 years. She goes, no thanks. I said, and she's not a lazy lady at all. And I went, what are you talking about? And she goes, I'm not going to die at a desk. She goes, I have no interest in doing that. She goes, I'll work as hard as I need to work, but Dad, you need to wake up. It's a different time now. People approach life differently. It's a lifestyle issue. So anyway, something to think about.
Yeah,
we're done.
Yeah,
sorry.
that's pretty much it. I mean, we the idea was then to leave it up to discussion. I don't know that we necessarily have anything there.
Good. So we can get questions from the members here, and yes.
What did she end up doing?
My daughter, she's working she's flying all around the country and not working as hard as she would have in New York, but she's got flexibility of schedule. She was afraid if she went to New York or Chicago or some wonderful places, which are really, had great potential. But she does mass torts. She takes depositions. She just finished a trial down in Orlando on Roundup? No, on the mesh cases.
That's right.
We got a $2.5 million verdict, and in the middle of all kinds of appellate stuff. But she works from home. She hasn't even gone out to get office space. She works out of her house between she and her husband transporting children. But she's got the lifestyle. I think all of the children, in my case, that went to work as lawyers did it because of flexibility of schedule. They knew that if I had to work hard, I worked hard, but when I didn't, I could be at baseball games and the like and share the things that are important. So, sorry, that's what she's doing.
Yeah.
And she's actively practicing. So.
How do you guys, maybe my family's the only one with, tension at times, but how do you guys separate the father-son dynamic from the partner-employee? If there's a dispute at work, are you bringing that home? Do you have challenges with that? How do you deal with that?
Usually it's a shut door in the office and the two of us yelling at each other. No, I mean, that does happen once in a while, but I don't know. We've been able to separate the two very well from the get-go. I think we've made a conscious decision to do so.
I've had to compromise.
Yeah, he just does what I say at all times. And then,
it's not as hard as I thought. We really did have difficulty growing up. Not major stuff, but we differed in opinions from sports to academics to everything, I would say. So it was of great concern. I was glad that he went to the state attorney's office because he had different people to work with and different bosses. But it's never brought home. I mean, it'll continue for a day or two sometimes on challenges about the office.
and I think part of two things was I wanted to go to the state attorney's office. I was following in his footsteps, but I wanted to get trial experience. I wanted to be comfortable in the courtroom, and I didn't want to leave the state attorney's office until I felt like I was comfortable in a courtroom, and I felt like I got that experience. I also wanted to work for someone when they told me I had to do something, I had to do it. I wasn't going to you know, I'll argue with my father all day long if he tells me to do something, but I wanted to make sure I was working for an environment where not only by my supervisor, but my boss's boss, they're having me do things that, not that I disagree with, but that, I don't want to have to deal with this, but I have to anyways. So I think I wanted that mentality. And then when it came to working over there, I sort of went in, I know he's been practicing for a number of years. I've tried to embrace, I'll tell him if I disagree with him, but for the most part, I'll concede in the end to his discretion. Typically, I think that's part of.
Biggest concern is I've never been able to get along with an office manager, and I say this part of it seriously. We've had 2 or 3 or 4 just because I want to do it my own way, like all of us do. Okay, we have our own perspective and stuff. So 25 to 30, and at my best moment, my worst moment, 50% of my time is spent doing some of the stuff we're talking about. I love the practice of law. I genuinely can tell you in 47 years, I have never, ever, ever had a bad day. I've had stressful days, but I did not want him to fall into the role of doing what I was doing and spending as much time managing without practicing law. So every chance I get to encourage other folks in the office to be doing things so that he's not doing them and that he's not the only one making the decisions. But people have been pretty deferential, knowing that he didn't just come in with no experience. So, but it's not without conflict, trust me.
Still dictate your time? You still dictate?
Totally dictate.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I email, and I don't type well, but I type lots of memos and emails, and thank you very much for coming. Nice to see you. But what he said is true. Probably 75% of the office type all their pleadings and then send them to the assistant for modification and the like. But I totally dictate everything legal. I couldn't style a pleading. I can fix a pleading, and they email, and we email back and forth and the like. But email's been phenomenal. I mean, there's nothing like it. Nothing like it. So.
And we cover all sides of it. We've got some that are comfortable with everything. I mean, even when I started, there was not a laptop in the office. No one had a laptop, and that's part of the mentality of if you're not in the office, you're not working. Well, no, you can do your work elsewhere.
I still
now.
believe that.
I know. I know. So we've gotten laptops for the attorneys that want them. But I mean, we have an attorney in the office who has a computer, doesn't know how to use it. So, when it comes time to watch has a video or something like that, I'll bring it to his assistant. Can you turn this on my computer for me? I mean, you can email, but that attorney still uses dictation. But a lot of the attorneys, I've learned to do a lot of their own things and learn to adapt with the times.
I'd like to comment and follow up and thank Chase for his discussion about interaction with other attorneys being professional and being courteous, and the draconian old language of law and govern yourself accordingly. Of course, that's a powerful statement at the end, but you can also just say, sincerely or with kind regards. The letter said what you would say, and the fact that you speak for 5 minutes with John before you go into your subject. I like to think of our roles in a civil case or even in a criminal case as a game of chess, and it should be at a professional level. And we are opponents on the board, but we can be civil and polite. And throughout Florida, the different regions have different atmospheres in that. If you've had to deal with some of it from South Florida, it's a little different. Even Central Florida has a few differences. North Florida's delightful in most part. And if we keep ourselves in check and recognize we're advocating for a client, we're trying to do what we can. This isn't my case. Somebody brought this case to my office. I'm going to do the best I can. But getting along with the other attorney is so important, and I appreciate your comments on that. We need to always remind ourselves that there are lawyers on the other side. They got hired to play the other side of the board. When you sit down at a game of chess, you put a pawn in each hand. The other pawn it picks. Okay, you're white this game. All right, you'll be black this game. It doesn't matter. We're playing chess. Let's be polite. And afterwards, we shake hands. We're adverse when we play, but we're not contentious against one another.
Yep.
And I appreciate you covering that. We should say that in every meeting. I think we need to remind it.
It's a good point.
Because Florida is better than the rest of the states with that.
It's a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the most fun part of just working together?
Nobody said it was fun working together.
Yeah, that might take a minute.
We eat lunch together almost every day. And I tell people there is nothing cooler than working with one of your children. Not all day long. But yeah.
We do.
And we share, I mean, legally. We probably have more arguments legally than we do about the office operations and stuff. He'll walk in and go, well, this doesn't need to be filed. And I'll go, it needs to be filed. And here's why. Well, I can do it this way. I said, well, that's the wrong approach, you know. And so, yeah, I think most of our serious arguments are on the legal stuff. And I'm learning to respect a lot more. And I don't know that he has, but I'm learning to respect a lot more of what he has to say legally. He's tried 25 jury trials. You know how that works down there. I mean, they
tried a case together.
They throw
Against one
that's
another,
right.
yeah.
Let me guess who won.
Actually, I think we may have won that one. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. On the.
Well, I
one of the few.
constantly introduce
But we were out. Yeah.
Matt Lafrano, and I was going to tell all of you, if y'all want to have a drink while you're here, or even two, there's probably no finer criminal defense attorney in the city of Jacksonville. And David Willis might be second, but Matt Lafrano is, to watch him in a courtroom, I said what I said about Rick Block. He doesn't do criminal work. Go watch Matt Lafrano.
Let them go from it.
Oh yeah.
And
Talking about a professional experience. I mean, I reflect on that as one of the most positive criminal trials I think I've ever had, where there was communication's everything, and and that's where what you look for with someone who's going to communicate both ways, where you can get a return phone call.
there's a famous line that people that are represented by the public defender's office sometimes use. They turn around, and if they're not getting the result they want, they'll turn around to the judge and go, well, I want another lawyer. I want a real lawyer. And Matt had been appointed on a case, and Judge Healy, I think, is the one that looked up and said, and they said, I want a different lawyer, because Matt was telling them the truth. You're going to get convicted, and this is what's going to happen. Judge Healy said, he just won the last 4 trials in front of me that were unwinnable. There's no better lawyer in the city of Jacksonville. The guy went, okay, I get it. But I want to thank those that are military and current and past, and how impressive that is. And I always like to tell the story in front of David Willis about the things that David Willis does. David built, as a general contractor, and built some of the biggest houses in the city of Jacksonville. David is a pilot. He's a surfer. He's a great lawyer and a really good friend. We're really lucky. He's a beaches guy, so to get him in town is pretty impressive. So.
Thank you. I like the surfer part.
Yeah, I understand. Has a beautiful wife that's got a massage. Is it called
The massage spa.
a spa? I'm always afraid of saying parlor. That just just got a tone about it that doesn't. So sorry.
I have one more question, two-part, following up on working together. I mean, are any of the other siblings, or what are are they envious? Are they like, how are they kind of like you're taking one for the team? How are
The youngest 2 are not at all. They're at the rebellious teenage years, so they can't wrap their head around it. The oldest one, Vanessa's just always been on. I don't think it's ever crossed her mind. She loves her job. She's been out there. I mean, the hardest challenge getting her from Kansas City to Jacksonville was how much she loved her job. So this opportunity for her to be able to continue to work there, but back here was. I think that was the only thing really keeping her in Kansas City. So I don't think she wanted to do that. And my older brother, he's just always liked to sort of do his. I don't think he wants to work for someone. He always wants to work for himself, even if it's working for his father. So no, I don't think I don't think they look at it as envy, or that I'm necessarily taking the bullet for him.
No, they definitely don't look at it as envy.
And do you have other younger attorneys that you're shepherding through that kind of the next generation after you?
I think I'm the youngest attorney in the office, so not yet. No, Tim's 3 years older. Yeah, so we've got some younger attorneys in the office, Jerry being one of them. But no, I think I am the youngest one there. Yeah. You're only
Or Phil.
52? Is that right? Yeah.
Jerry, do you have a question?
I don't really.
Don't you dare.
Okay, sorry, Well, I've got a question. What does the future look like? Is there more of a transition, or how do where do you see the future?
You're asking me if I'm going to quit soon?
Yeah, well.
I laugh. A very good friend died recently. He brought his son into the business. He was a financial manager. Small operation, managed a lot of money. Brought his son in, and within about 3 or 4 years, his son not only edged him out, didn't put him on the street. The guy's got plenty of money. He just passed away. So I think about that often. No, there's still a lot of communication. I come in every day. I may only stay till 2 or 3 o'clock. I'm finally enjoying people in the community and the like. So no, I hope to continue for a very long time. You know.
You hope to have him continue?
Well, why would you ask him that publicly?
Just asking.
It's been a progressive edging him out thing.
There are booby traps set
Oh,
up.
yeah. Oh my God.
We just said no question.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's true. Yeah, several. And it's been a very progressive transition of the things that I do within the office. I mean, it started very much just my own caseload, and then I've progressively started to help with the personnel and the administrative side of things. So it's progressively sort of happened, and I think it's still continuing to.
And yes, we are having our party. That those of you that have been here, been in the past, it's going to be December 1st.
December 1st.
And I'll get the list. So it's something we do. More people know we do that than they do we even practice law. But on December 1st, we have about 12 to 1,500 people come to the office on Hendricks Avenue, and we have entertainment and great food and great spirits, literally and figuratively, and we provide transportation home. Invitations are not going to go out for a week or two, but y'all were gracious enough to show up and not embarrass me by asking any terrible questions.
I just got disinvited, I know.
Didn't help.
Oh, good. Any last questions? Well, great. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Fabulous. This has been a very exciting event, Jacksonville Lawyers Roundtable. We've got another one November 4th, so I'm looking forward to seeing who's going to be our speaker. And if you have any ideas for speakers for this next year, let me know. Probably in December we'll do some kind of a social. So I'm not sure. It'll be a social lunch on December 1st, I think it is. I don't have a calendar.
No, this
Yeah, oh God.
First is Thursday.
First is Thursday.
Very
Right?
good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, great.
First
So it'll
Thursday.
be recovery social. That's right.
You're with that ice, so they can competing parties.
That's right. That'll be fun. Good. So go for it. Have a
Thank you, Michael. I'd love to
great
catch up.
October, and see you all
Thanks,
in
Eddie.
November.
Thank you very much. Always nice to see you.
Can't
You're
wait
always
till the
sweet.
1st.
There you go. Put it on the calendar.
I did.
Whoever. Make sure it's covered. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.